invite you to be seated, and as you do, turn your attention to the screens.
He played for around 45 minutes to a restless conveyor belt of just over 1,000 people. Few seemed to notice. Fewer still even offered him any money for his time. You'll see at the end that one lady ends up recognizing him and thanks him for what he had done. The urbane, cultured crowd of DC professionals were unaware that one of the finest classical musicians of his generation was playing some of the most complex and elegant music ever written for the violin on a Stradivarius worth $3.5 million, or that just a couple of nights before he had played the same music to a packed-out Boston Symphony Hall, average ticket price $100. It was an experiment conducted by the Washington Post. Do we perceive beauty in unexpected places? In a mundane setting, at an inconvenient time, would true beauty overcome and break out into our lives? I will admit to you, I most likely would have just walked right on by. I'm always focused. I'm in a hurry. I want to get someplace. But maybe the one message you need to hear today is just the reality that it's hard for us to do anything well in a hurry. And we can't have relationships in a hurry. We can't pray in a hurry. We can't really enjoy beauty in a hurry. And we need beauty in our lives. And it may be that right now, the pace of your life, the way that your life is structured, it's going to be almost impossible for you to really live into the life that God is calling you, because just there's too much going on. Jesus is calling us to a better life. Last week we listened to Jesus say, "You have heard it said, 'Do not commit adultery.' But I tell you, anyone who looks lustfully at a woman has already committed adultery in his heart." And I want you to know that Jesus is after our hearts. He wants us to become the type of people who honor sex. He wants us to become the type of people who really honor the way that God has created us as sexual beings. But more than that, he wants us to become the type of people that God intends us to be. Sex has a part to play, but it's not the whole part. It's not even the most important part. It's not probably even in the top 10, maybe 20. The biblical sex ethic is actually pretty simple. Sex, the act of making love, is given to a husband and wife, a gift to help them live into the covenant of marriage where two distinct and different persons come together in holy matrimony and they become one flesh. It is an act that declares, I'm committed to you and exclusively you. It is the consummation of the marriage vows. Forsaking all other human bonds, I commit myself to love, honor, and cherish you as long as we both shall live. Take this gift outside of that relationship, and it isn't a blessing, but it will end up doing harm. Now, we may look for loopholes. We talked a little bit about this last week if you weren't here. There may be some valid questions in society today that, what do we do about homosexuals who want to get married? What do we do about transgendered people? But I think for most of us, we know the biblical sex ethic, and the challenge isn't knowing what we're supposed to do. The real challenge is wanting to do what we're called to do. One of my favorite prayers I've heard recently is Augustine. Let's see, that would be about 1,600 years ago. Lord, give me a heart that is chaste and pure, just not yet. Consider the challenge of a single Christian committed to living the Christian sex ethic. Consider both how hard it is, but then the sense of frustration. I've remained chaste in singleness, but my friend didn't and now is getting married to someone else. I'm still single. He was able to have his cake and he was able to eat it too. Everything seems to be going well for him and I'm still alone. Or consider the young Christian woman who, when she was 16 years old, followed the True Love Waits campaign. I will tell you, I wasn't very familiar with this campaign, but it is one of these typical campaigns where we're going to put a law on top of you. Here's what you must do if you're going to be a good Christian. And we're called, and there's some truth, but if the power is coming from us, if this is really about just religion and what I must do to please God, it's going to end up crushing us. So she joins this True Love Waits campaign. She puts on her chastity ring, signifying her deal with Jesus. I'm following this rule, and you're going to deliver me a faithful husband. Let me share with you a testimony from a woman who experienced this. It is a graveyard of hearts, this place where single church girls crash into their late 20s and early 30s. Churches see the symptoms. They scramble to reach out to the ever-growing young adult singles crowd who feels alienated by family-oriented services. But there is something bigger behind it than that, much bigger. There are a lot of girls out there who don't know who God is anymore. The God of their youth group years just isn't working out. Back then, God said to wait for sex until they are married, until he brings the right man along for a husband. They signed a card, put it on an altar, they pledged to wait, and they waited and waited, and wait they did. But many of them, if they are honest, will tell you that time has passed and it's wrecking their view of God. It's not enough for us to know what we're supposed to do. The law does not save. Jesus wants us to know what to do, but he also wants to come and provide power and ability for us to live into a new way of life. He wants to transform us. Share with you one of my favorite passages, Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. We heard this last week. Same ideas, 1 Corinthians 6. Your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. Offer your bodies. Keep them pure. Yes, indeed. This is how you are to live your life. Verse 2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. we're being invited into maturity in Christ, where it's not just that we're told what to do, but that we understand that the things that we're told, whether to do or not to do, are for our good. And we get it. We know why. This is where it's not enough for you just to know the biblical sex ethic. It's to know why it is a good thing. That you would go, oh, look, the wisdom, the beauty, the goodness. Joshua Bell's unexpected performance in a D.C. subway, I believe, is something like the Christian sex ethic. It appears maybe dull and inconvenient as we bustle around trying to piece our lives together, especially in our society, where the messages that we constantly hear is that you can only be fulfilled, happy, and mature when your sexuality is set free. To repress the appetite for sex, according to our society, is to deny your true self. It's repressive, it's wrong, and it is the antithesis of the Christian sex ethic. But if we slow down and lean in to listen to the divine melody, to see God's vision for human sexuality, we will see truth, beauty, and goodness. Jesus offers, he teaches us, honor sex, honor the gift of sex. This isn't about withholding the cake. This isn't about striking a deal. He is really offering us a way to live, leading us into more and better life. So, the challenge before all of us, and what I want to help with, I hope, today, is that we would see the positive side of why he says no to sex, because we would see the good that he's trying to give us in it. And to get there, I think there's at least 3 things that we have to wrestle through. What is the essential nature of sex? Where are we headed? What is our ultimate purpose? In your notes, I have 2 questions that go together about being and doing. Who am I and what's my mission? Those questions need to be answered if we're going to understand a biblical worldview. But the question that I really will focus in on today for us is, how does God want to heal us in our brokenness when it comes to our sexuality? But let's start with the need to affirm the essential nature of sex. What exactly is sex given for? And with this, I'm going to need a volunteer. And I've asked Nick Gonzalez to come up and to help. And Nick and I are in life group together. And I have 1 boy. He has 2. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking of, okay, so here's some stuff to talk about as far as the nature of sex that we all have to understand. But I have an illustration idea, and this may actually, and so we're, as 2 dads, we're going to test this out. I'm going to test myself too about, do we think this might be helpful for our sons to hear? And now, what I've said already is the act of making love is actually, it's a physical expression where it's actually communicating something. And the biblical idea of it is, I want to be committed to you. I want to stick to you. And really, the biblical idea is for life, until death do us part. I am committing. And see, some of this is about coming to the reality here of, can you help me? I'll let you stick it down. I did it. Yeah, there we go. Good, nice and good. Okay, so something for our sons to know is that they're going to hear stuff in society that just says you won't be a real man until you've, done it. And in fact, this stuff that you're hearing at church, it's just repressive. You really need to free yourself. But if they would do some study, and this stuff is out there in a lot of books, They actually understand that at just the physical level of making love, there's stuff going on in our bodies that is communicating the reality of what we said sex is. So the first thing that they found out is that there's this hormone called oxytocin. And oxytocin originally got identified with mothers while they were nursing their babies. And when mothers nurse their babies, this hormone gets released. And and what it ends up doing is it attaches you. This chemical gets released in your body. And while the mother is nursing, this chemical gets released. And it's a bonding where it says, okay, I'm committed to you. And then they discovered that same chemical gets released when a man and a woman make love. And it floods through your body, and what it's saying is I want to be bonded with you. And you see, the thing here is making love is not just a physical thing. It's emotional, it's spiritual, but God has designed us in such a way that even at the physical, bodily, chemical level, attachment is going on. You can't even help it. And now the idea is I want to be stuck to you, but then what happens when you stop being stuck? Yeah. Ow. It didn't hurt that bad. I mean, this isn't duct tape. We were being kind and gentle with this stuff. It's gaffer's tape, so it's not as... Did you get any hair? Okay. Oh, I got a few. Okay, but here's the thing. So what's going to happen is that our boys are going to sit there and they're going to say, oh, yeah, you can just, as long as you're not like with two different people, just go ahead. And then you do this again. And it wasn't as strong that time, was it? And then, we could have a conversation about sexually transmitted diseases, because there's stuff that I have, and if I stick it in, ew. But you keep doing this, and then the very thing that's trying to bond you together doesn't work the way that it's supposed to. So what do you think? You think this would help the boys? It wasn't too painful, was it? No? Yeah? Okay. Thank you. Now, it's spiritual, it's physical, it's emotional, the very act itself. Now, and I didn't tell you this. So they first identified oxytocin, and men get a little bit of it in the lovemaking, but there's actually another hormone that men get when they make love, and it's called vasopressin. I'll make sure I get the spelling of this right. Yes, vasopressin, and it has been dubbed the monogamy molecule. It's similar in structure to oxytocin. It gets released in men when they make love, and it causes them to want to attach to the person that they're making love to, as well as to the children that come through this act. The very physical way that we have been made points us to the reality of sex. Rip the bond apart, it's going to hurt. Do it over and over and over, and the very thing that's supposed to help you, bring you together, becomes less effective, but the damage is already done. God made sex in such a way that the very physical act was pointing you towards the reality, and the fundamental principle underlying Scripture's preservation of sex within marriage is this: there really is no such thing as making love outside of marriage. You're just harming somebody, and you're denying what the act itself is actually saying. We'll go on in a little while, and we'll hear Jesus say this: let your yes be yes and your no be no. Every time you make love, what you're declaring through that act is, I want to be with you forever, as long as we both shall live. This is at every level. Repeatedly hooking up involves breaking the bodily promise, go through repeated hookups and breakups, and many people will end up being emotionally scarred as well. Psychologists call it defensive detachment. I'm afraid you'll hurt me, so I'm going to build an emotional wall to avoid being vulnerable to you. And this begins to break down in us where we struggle to have deep attachment, and it becomes more and more difficult. We live in a hookup society today, and this is where younger people are living at. Out of all of this, a YouGov poll found that almost half of all millennials have given up the hope or even desire for a monogamous relationship. Now, this is just one aspect of lining up with reality. And I'll share a little story. So one of the big ways that my family got impacted when I was young was through drugs. My older brother, 8 years older, started using drugs when he was 13, and the family found out when he was 16. And when I was 8 years old, I got drugged to every drug awareness seminar at all the schools that were happening back then with my mom. I was getting introduced to the reality of drugs. I got offered drugs in middle school and high school. Never once was I tempted, because I believed, I knew that this was not going to deliver what they were promising. It may feel good for a moment, but it leads to so much brokenness, there's no possible way. You know that lovemaking in the context of marriage, one of the fruits of it, one of the gifts of it, is it's intended to be a blessing that draws you together. It's intended to be a blessing. And in the very act of it, it brings forward more life, reproduction. Reproduction is not all there is about making love, but it's an essential part of it. There's only one context that can really handle the weight of reproducing life and then helping that life flourish. And it's in a solid family with a husband and a wife, a mom and a dad. Yeah, we can make other things work out, but that's the ideal. We could talk about the reality of this act of making love and how Jesus is wanting to bring us into life and helping us to avoid harm. And we could just talk about sexually transmitted diseases. 110 million cases of sexually transmitted diseases in America today. 20 million this year. 50% of that 20 million will be those between the ages of 15 and 24 contracting their first sexually transmitted disease. Align with reality. It's a wonderful gift in its place. Take it outside of it and it's going to hurt. Second, where are we headed? What's our real purpose? This world is not the end. It is a place in which our ends are determined. And Jesus even told us this last week, that this is why sex is a big deal. If your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off, throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. But this isn't about avoiding hell. This is about where we're going and what this is all about. And it's about getting to the life to come. And both Jesus and the book of Revelation celebrate, point us up, lift our heads. And when it lifts our heads to where we're headed, they both use the same imagery. You and I, we're headed to a wedding. You and I are going to be participating in a wedding. Revelation 19, 7 through 9. Let us rejoice and be glad and give him glory. For the wedding of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. Fine linen, bright and clean, was given her to wear. The fine linen stands for the righteous acts of God's holy people. And the angel said to me, write this, blessed are those who are invited to the wedding supper of the Lamb. And he added, these are the true words of God. This vision is given to us to sustain us in hope, to remind us that this life is not all that there is. This life is only getting us, and we're in a waiting period with great expectation because the true gift is still ahead. There's good things in this life. There's beautiful things in this life, but this is not the goal. Jesus tells a number of stories where he uses this imagery of marriage, but one of them comes in Matthew 25, verses 1 through 13. The picture would have been familiar as far as in Jesus' day because he's giving a picture of how weddings were done. 3 parts to a wedding in the Jewish world. The first part is an agreement gets made, and a man who is going to be the groom ends up entering into a contract with a family and the bride, and he's going to take her as his wife. And that initial agreement, typically, there's going to be a dowry that gets paid from the father of the bride, and to the husband. And when they enter into this contract, it's pretty much like they're good and married already, except there aren't. There's more, but they've made a commitment. And in fact, this is what happens in Jesus' birth story. Mary gets pregnant while this commitment has been made, and the actual penalty is because you're basically married, even though it's not consummated yet, you should be treated as an adulterer, and she should be stoned. And that was some of the tension that Joseph was feeling about this whole thing. Didn't want that to happen to her. He's a good and righteous man. That's the first step. They all understood that. And but Jesus is putting forward, this is our story, but there's one major difference. This time, it's not the father of the bride who has to pay something to the groom. This time, the father of the groom pays something so that he can purchase the bride. And God so loved us that he gave his one and only son, that his son might die for us so that we might be able to enter into this relationship. And Jesus lays his life down for us. And then what happens is that for about a year, the groom goes off and he prepares a place for them to live. And what's interesting is that in John's gospel, as Jesus is preparing for his disciples and his departure, this is the very language that he uses. Don't let your hearts be troubled. It's going to be okay. I'm going to go and I'm going to prepare a place for you. And if I prepare a place for you, I'm going to come back and then I'm going to take you to be with me. And this is the imagery of the groom goes off and then what you know is sometime later, typically about a year later, the groom will, at midnight, begin a processional from his house that he's prepared with torches and his friends, and they will make their way through the village. And the whole village will be excited about this because it's a great high point in life. And they will start to gather with the processional, and they will make their way to the house of the bride. And then the bride will be there with her maidens, her best girlfriends. And then they'll join with the processional, then they'll go back to the groom's house, and then there'll be a wedding, they'll get married, and there'll be 7 days of feasting. That's where we're headed. A great big party that's about love and romance and fulfillment and intimacy and lovemaking and closeness and goodness. And Jesus tells this story, but he tells a little bit more about these 10 maidens who are with the bride. 5 of the friends were wise, and they brought their lamps and some extra oil just in case they had to wait a little bit longer. The other 5 were not so wise. They did not have extra oil. They were not so prepared. And when he came, they missed the party. They weren't there. They went to go buy their oil. Jesus tells the story to excite us. Here's our destiny, joyous intimacy with God, and a warning. We must be ready for when Jesus comes. Will he find any faith when he comes? And our faith is following and trusting. And there is a call here for us to trust our life with him in everything, including how he has created us as sexual beings. But our sexualness, it points to this reality. You and I are fundamentally incomplete. But as much as we need human companionship, in the kingdom that is coming, we will not be given or taken in marriage to other human beings. However much we need other human beings, and we do, we need God even more. Human marriage, in its highest form, is a signpost of hope, giving us a little glimpse of our future glory. There are times when people who are married, they give you some idea of the love, joy, selfless giving, intimacy, passion, creative force that will be fundamentally the way that we experience our relationship with God in the life to come. We get glimpses of it through marriage, but human marriage is not the goal. Our ultimate union is with the Father through the Son and the power of the Spirit. And as much as society got right in the biblical idea of human marriage before Jesus, with Jesus, when he came, what he made clear is that human marriage is not the ultimate end. For those who are married, it puts marriage in its ultimate context. The purpose of marriage is not self-fulfillment. The purpose of marriage is not preservation of the human race. The purpose of marriage is not bringing together two incomplete halves so that you can complete one another. Those are all popular ideas in our society, and none of them are what the Bible is holding up based on what the end is. The purpose of marriage, in the biblical understanding, clarified by Jesus, is to help make us holy. A husband and wife, two best friends, committed together in Jesus Christ, who will help one another, call one another, encourage one another to be their best selves in Jesus Christ. As Christian marriage partners, we call one another to become our best selves. We live with Christ as the rock on which we build our lives. No relationship, no human person has the ability to fulfill all that you need and to complete you. You will put too much weight on your spouse. You will be disappointed. We will end up using them instead of loving them. We're called to participate in the mission of shining his light into the world. As we live according to the biblical sex ethic, we show the world that erotic love actually finds fulfillment in agape love. Yeah, lovemaking, it's a good thing in its place. But it's not the most important thing. It's not even close. And if you really want to have erotic love find its fulfillment, realize that it finds its truest fulfillment in sacrificial love, where you're willing to lay down your life for your partner. If you are single and you follow Jesus, you are not incomplete. I want you to hear that. That the whole idea that this person's going to complete me, it's a myth, it's a lie. You are not incomplete. You don't need another person to complete you. No other person can. You were made for God. He is the only one who can complete you. And you get to participate in this same mission of shining the light out into the world. You're not incomplete. You have the gift of love. You have the gift of community. You have the gift of relationship. The most important things about what it means to be human, all of these things are yours. You're part of a church family. We're all living into this. And you know something the world doesn't. This world is coming to an end, and the things that this world puts its ultimate trust and hope in will not deliver. And however much the society wants to celebrate free sex, the society is wrong. It's not free. It actually will hurt. We demonstrate the hollowness of the modern world quest for sexual fulfillment as the end-all and be-all. Jesus' announcement of the coming kingdom puts our present desire for sexual and relational fulfillment in its ultimate context. It isn't the end-all and be-all. They're good in their place. In their place, they can be signposts that help lift our eyes to Jesus. But each one of you is eternal. And each one of you are invited in to help other people who were made for eternity come into this banquet and find their fulfillment in Jesus Christ. So, align with reality, understand where we're headed. And the final thing, and this is probably the most important thing, if we're going to choose to live into the biblical sex ethic, where we want to do this, where we see that it's good, where we go, okay, he's not holding back the cake, he's not trying to punish me, we need to wrestle through the questions of identity and mission. Who am I? What am I supposed to do? These are big questions. We could talk about the fact that he created us as image bearers, reflecting his way and his beauty and his goodness. We could talk about the fact that in Jesus you are not a slave to desire. He's going to give you power so that you don't just do your base desires. That you don't have to just go along with instinct, that the things that we hear, where for this to be a man or even for a woman, and you just need to feed it and then you'll be set free, that's not it. We could talk about the fact that we're part of the family of God, and that every person is a brother or sister, and that we should value the image of God that we find in them. And I think it's all important and good. But what I want to focus on is this question: how does God want to bring healing into my life, in the brokenness that surrounds us and even in me when it comes to sexuality? And what I want to do is I want to share with you two stories that point to the way that God wants to heal us. The first story comes from C.S. Lewis in his book, The Great Divorce. Never read it, small little book, but it's really good, and I'm going to share just a little episode that happens. It's the story of a man who's on a bus ride from hell to heaven. And the bus ride tells you how over time, as he's getting closer to heaven, God is at work in his life, slowly transforming him so he's the type of person who actually wants to be in glory. Because in his brokenness, it's too real, and it's too big, and it's too weighty, and it's too strong, and he can't handle it all. But God's at work, and as he's making his way closer to heaven, he's slowly being transformed. And on the way, towards the end, he comes across this man who's really just a ghost of a man. He's barely even physical anymore. And on his back, on his shoulder, attached to him, is a lizard. Slimy, oily, whispering into his ear only things that he can hear. And he sees this man, and the man has come, and he's reached it where he's beginning to see something of the glory of heaven. And he realizes that in his present state, with this lizard on his back, he's not appropriately dressed to go. And so he starts to turn back towards hell. But he wishes that he could. And then an angel appears, an angel in power and in glory, somewhat like a person, and he comes before him and he says, I can set you free. If you want to be free, I can take this lizard off your back, break it, and you will be free, and then you can keep going forward. Well, I'll think it over. I'm not ready to do this today, but maybe tomorrow. There is no other day. All days are present now. And he's saying, in effect, this is the day of salvation. This before you, now. He goes on. What's going to happen? You won't die. I'll get you through this. It hurts. Didn't say it wasn't going to hurt. I just said you're not going to die. But I cannot kill it against your will. That is impossible. I have to have your permission. And so the angel's hands start to reach and is almost closing around the lizard, but not quite. And then the lizard begins to chatter so loud that even I could hear what it was saying. Be careful. He can do what he says. He can kill me, but then you will be without me forever. It's not natural. How could you live? You'd only be a sort of a ghost, which he presently is. Not a real man as you are now. He doesn't understand. He's only a cold, bloodless, abstract thing. It may be natural for him, but it isn't for us. It goes on. But the man finally chooses. Get it over with. Take it off me. Then suddenly, the ghost of the man was transformed into a full man, bright and strong. The lizard was cast down. But the lizard, it wasn't dead. It was transformed. What stood before me was the greatest stallion that I have ever seen. Silvery white, but with mane and tail of gold. It was smooth and shining, rippled swells of flesh and muscle, whinnying and stamping its hoofs. As it stamped, the land shook and the trees dindled. And then this person who had been a ghost and is now a full man jumps up on the stallion and he rides towards heaven. And the picture of all of this is the place of desire. You and I are passionate beings. We've been created in the image of God, and He is a being of incredible passion. The problem is not with desire. It's not with the reality that we have passion. The problem is that the passion has been corrupted, and it's misdirected. And what God wants to do is He doesn't want to take away all passion and desire. He wants to transform it so that the passion and desire will actually lead you to Him. So let me tell you a second story that makes this very clear. It's found in John chapter 4. If you haven't read John 4 in a while, I'd say go home and read it, because I'm not going to be able to tell you the whole story. I'm just going to give you the highlight. Jesus comes to the well of Jacob, and it's the middle of the day. His disciples have gone to town to get some food, and he is thirsty. And there is a woman who is a Samaritan, and she is there. And she's come in the middle of the day because of the shame. And what ends up coming out in the story is that her life is broken. She is a hollow shell. She has been trying to put her life together in her own strength and power. And the empty water jug that she carries symbolizes her inability to do it. And what she'd been trying to fill her life with was men and love. And she'd been married 5 times, and they'd all left her. And the man that was living with her now wasn't even her husband. And Jesus asks her for water, and she can't believe that he does that, because she's a Samaritan woman. And Jesus says, if you knew the one who was asking you for water, you would ask me, and I would give you living water, and you would never thirst again. And what ends up happening is that she talks to Jesus, and he has to break down some barriers. But he proves that he really is a prophet, and even more. And in the end, she asks Jesus to fill her, and he does. And she goes running back to the village. Come, hear a man. And she invites them all to come. And the water jug that she brought is still empty, because she doesn't need that anymore. Because what she really needed was she needed Jesus, who is the living water. Passion is not the problem. We are made to be passionate. The problem is that our heart ends up attaching to things and putting ultimate importance in other things, when what we need and who we need more than anyone else is Jesus Christ. If you and I want to have success over desire, if we want to begin to live into life, it's not about denying desire, it's about finding what our true desire is really for. No person, no thing, nothing in this world can fill you with what you really need except Jesus. Come to him. Be with him. The solution is not us straining and struggling against temptation. It's us no longer being tempted because we realize it's empty and it won't deliver, and what we really need and who's already been given and what we have is Jesus Christ himself. And I sit here, and there's this part of me, and here's the thing. I want to convince you that he really is who you need. But the only way that the convincing can happen is that you really open up your heart to him and really start turning to him. And today is a day that you can do that. Today is a day, because see, he knows that you're empty. He knows that you're hungry. He knows that you have passion, and he knows that he is the only one who can really fulfill it. All the other stuff, it's wonderful, it's beautiful, it all has its place. When it gets put right, when your heart gets transformed, when Jesus is first, we can enjoy the beauty. We are living in the greatest love story ever. We're just not the hero. We're the object of the hero's desire. He loves you. He moved heaven and earth to come to you. He's done everything possible so that he might take you to be with him. He wants to be with you forever. You are beloved. This is the truth. This is reality. It is about passion. It is about love. So, he invites us to come and to know him. He invites us to come and to allow him to touch us, to heal us, to empower us, to be with us. And we get a chance every Sunday to come into his presence. We get a chance every day. He's always available. We can pray. We can read the Bible. There's all of these things, but in the end, what it's really about is him and you experiencing him. And today you have an opportunity at this table. Jesus was with his disciples before his death. He took bread. He blessed it. He broke it. He gave it to them, and then he said these words, and this is really important. This is my body broken for you. I lay down my life for you. The way that you're going to live is because I take your place and I die in your place. The way for you to live is to receive me, to take me in, to bring me in, to allow my strength, my power to come inside of you so that you might really live. Take and eat so that you might find your life. This cup is the cup of the new covenant, my blood shed out for you. But it's wine. It's fruit. It's goodness. It's joy. It's celebration. It's a party. The way that we overcome temptation is not by grinning or by bearing it and gritting and It's through joy and finding our joy in Jesus. And so he says, come and drink this cup. And this is all in anticipation. Because you see, we're going to party forever. That's our destiny. Future glory. Better than you can imagine. No more tears. No more death. No more crying. No more suffering. It's going to be more intimacy, more love, more pleasure, more joy than any of us can possibly know. And so come, drink this cup, and start learning how to party. It's really there. And if we get so uptight and so religious that we can't have joy anymore, we're missing where our strength comes from. So I want to invite the servers to come forward.